for those of you who have been listening for a while, you would have heard one of my first guests, Mandy McHugh, who came on the show to talk about her debut book, Chloe Cates is Missing, that I loved so much. And her second book just came out this year called It Takes Monsters. And I absolutely devoured this one as well. It is about Victoria Tate, who has had enough of her very controlling, incompetent husband, Warren. And she basically decides that she's going to kill him. He has decided that she should basically quit her job that she loves and put a halt on her career, and raise their children. And that's not what she wants. And because of a couple different circumstances, she thinks the best thing that she can do is kill him. So she spends all this time planning, is going to do it at this gala. And the night of the gala that she had planned to kill him, someone else kills him. And now she's in the middle of a murder investigation. The police are trying to figure out what could have possibly happened to her husband. And she's having to answer questions while also trying to figure out who did it. This book is so fun for so many different ways. It is snarky. It is suspenseful. It's a thriller. It's very much a psychological thriller. But the main character is just so fun, as you'll hear us talk about in this interview. I just absolutely adored it. And I loved that I got to talk to Mandy about her love of including pop culture references, the different pressures that women feel socially, be it at work or at home, and the ways that we struggle with trying to look perfect or look a certain way, especially in wealthier communities. So I can't wait for you to hear our conversation. So let's get into it. So last time we were chatting, we were talking about your debut novel, Chloe Cates is Missing.
Yes.
And I'm super excited to talk about your second one, It Takes Monsters. So welcome back to the podcast, Mandy.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah. So what is the biggest difference that you've noticed, like writing your second novel? So since you kind of got your debut like out of the way, or however you want to say it, what's like the biggest difference that you've noticed?
It's weird when people, it's not weird, but it's
Yeah.
surreal when people are like, I loved your first book. I can't wait for your second book. Because, there was a time where I was like, am I even going to write a book? And like, who really cares what I have to say? No one's going to read this anyway. Like, there's so many great authors out there. And then people are like, I love your writing. I can't wait. What's coming out next? And I'm like, oh my God, you people are reading what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
Yeah.
It's so surreal and like humbling and just like amazing. Like I wake up every day and I'm just like, I cannot believe that I get to do this. It is
Oh,
so much fun.
that is so cool. Yeah, it is so fun. Like once you do get to know an author or like read something that you love, then you like always are like super excited when they announce their next one.
Yeah.
So it's fun on our side too.
Yeah.
So was there anything different about like your writing and thought process going into this book than your first one?
So I actually wrote It Takes Monsters before I wrote Chloe
Oh,
Cates.
okay.
So this was like the second book I ever wrote. Um, and it was originally called Play the Fool, and it was largely inspired by King Lear because I was like reading all my classics in the middle of the night when I was like feeding my kids and I couldn't sleep when I was a new mom.
Yeah.
So I had the original story for this before I had Chloe Cates, and Chloe Cates to this day is still the fastest book I've ever written. I finished my first draft in a month.
Wow.
So I've never been able to do that since. Fingers crossed for this one I'm working on now, but like,
Yeah.
but when it comes to the writing process and what was different, It
Mhm.
Takes Monsters went through several revisions.
Okay.
So the editing for it was much more intense.
Mhm.
It was originally in three different voices and in first person, and
Okay.
I changed uh, the entire thing to just from Victoria's point of view
Right.
in third person, which was a huge shift for me. And I hadn't written in third in so long. So it took me a
Uh-huh.
minute to like find my footing and like really get into the mindset from this perspective. But when
Right.
I did, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So instead of it being a focus on just the conflict, it was like this character dive, but
Mm-hmm.
also knowing everything else that I knew about where I wanted it to go, which did not
Yeah.
end up being where it actually went. There are like
Oh wow.
five different endings for
Oh
this.
my gosh.
Um,
That's
and
crazy.
I love the way it turned out and the one that made it to market, but like
Hmm.
the writing for this was an experience because I genuinely didn't know where it was going to go half the time. And then when
Yeah.
it did go someplace, it would get changed anyway.
Oh wow. Yeah, that
Yeah.
is definitely a very different process then.
Chloe Chloe had two endings that I
Okay.
toyed with, and I love how it ended, and I still think that I'm going to revisit it for the sequel that I'm still working on.
That was one
In
of my
the where it ended
questions.
now.
I was gonna ask because we
Yeah,
talked about it last time. So I was gonna ask at the end, but I was like, is there still a sequel in the works for Chloe
there
Cates?
there is a sequel in the works.
Oh,
I'm hoping to get it done in the next like month or so. Like it's
ooh,
going
that's
pretty well
exciting.
right now.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, fingers crossed for that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's its own unique process.
Oh yeah,
Um what was the it sounds like It Takes Monsters kind of like shifted and changed as you were writing it.
it
But
did.
what was your initial idea for it? Like what kind of like hit you first?
So it's funny. Um, I was still very much in the horror genre when I started writing it. And so I was just going for like things that scared me physically. Like I was like
Mm,
Stephen King gross out factor.
yes.
And the scene in King Lear where he takes out his own eyes always got right under my skin because that
Yeah.
is just such a
Whew.
horrifying act. So
Yeah.
that was really the first image idea that I had for It
Mhm.
Takes Monsters. I'm like, I want something visceral and
Yeah.
gory, and I don't want to do it in a way that's been done before, but
Mhm.
everybody wants to have the original idea. But
Right.
I knew I wanted like a family dynamic, and I knew
Mhm.
I wanted there to be some sort of um, relationship aspect for the murder and victim
Mhm.
setup. But I took that idea of the eyeball gouging and I ran with it.
Yeah. Yeah. That I love that that was like the touchstone because it
It
is
was.
like the way I've described it. I'm like it's this like bloody, gory, snarky, domestic psychological thriller. Like it does have all of it together. So even when you started off saying you like started off in horror, I was like, all right, that checks out.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of my writing comes from is like I'll take something that I'm afraid of and I work from there. Like a lot of people have asked me about like what comes first, the story or the twist, and I am
Hmm.
not somebody who ever really knows where the story is going to go. I'm still primarily like a pantser. I have
Yeah.
outlines sometimes, and especially for this one, like I really had to keep track of my thoughts
Hmm.
because it changed so much.
Yeah, I bet.
But I feel like my thrillers come from this like organic place of either a nightmare fear that I had
Mhm.
or just something that scares me on a daily basis. Chloe Cates was a lot of um, being afraid of what my daughter was going to encounter with social media. And
Yeah.
we grew up with stranger danger, but it's really a lot
Yeah.
more intense than stranger danger now because it's not just the trolls on the internet you have to worry about, but the people that see you as a way to capitalize
Mm.
on
Mhm.
your presence and your persona. Um, and then the one that I'm the third book that I have out now is
Mhm.
fingers crossed that that gets picked up too. But
Yes.
that one was inspired by a story I saw on the news where two women went to a bar and
Mhm.
one went into an Uber and never came home. And how many times I was in my that situation. Like we didn't really have Ubers when I was in college,
Right.
but like just the everyday. I went to the bars with my friends and we
Yeah.
didn't always go home together. And you're relying on somebody just to send you a text when they get home.
Yeah.
And sometimes they fall asleep or they don't remember.
Hmm.
And it's just this very, it could happen to you type
Yeah.
fear. It's so like that hit me. So I feel like that's just where my writing comes from.
Yeah.
It's the
That's really
fears.
cool. Because I was thinking about, so with Chloe Cates, it really does explore what you're saying, like the dangers of social media, but also kind of like the struggles of like parenting amidst that. And then
Yeah.
also it was like it's more of a cautionary tale. So it's also like diving into like, what if like as a parent you kind of like lost touch with reality a little bit
Yeah.
as you're parenting. And then It Takes Monsters really tackles like the social expectations that are placed on women based
Yes.
in work versus home life, and like
Yes.
what women are basically expected to give up. And one of my favorite lines is when she calls herself Warren's happy housewife and incubator. And like
Yes.
it's such a like literal explanation of like what it feels like sometimes when people are like, when are you gonna have kids? Like when that like
Yeah,
thinking
and
that you're just
it's so prevalent and like
Mhm,
so when I started having kids, none of my friends were really in the same place that I was and
mhm,
they were fine with me having them, but they were like career oriented
right.
and I have years before I need to make this decision if it's even right for me and
Yeah.
but they were still getting asked the questions like, when are you going to have kids? And even I had a kid and they're like, when are you
Mhm.
going to have another kid? Are you going to go
Right.
back to work? Are you going to stay home? And I took that and I was watching a lot of Handmaids at the
Oh,
time
yeah, yeah.
when I was editing. And it's like the fear of losing your
Mhm.
choice to like form your own path and your own, like, this is what I want for myself. But like, there's so many things that are out of your control and that dictate what you can and can't do. And in
Yes.
this case for Victoria, it's not just her family that she has to live up to for her obligations there. It's her husband who,
Mhm.
you know, seems like he wants to be her partner, but really he just wants somebody to listen to him
Mhm.
and do what is told.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And what's really fun about the book is how like we are trumping it up. Like most people wouldn't jump to killing their husband if he did that.
Right.
But what was so fun about it while you're reading it, like, I think with a lot of like kind of like vengeful fiction as well, is like it's fun to think of taking it to the extreme, and like it's fun to
Yeah.
kind of live through a character who's like truly being this snarky and this angry and is like, I'm gonna kill my husband. So, like, how much fun were you having
Oh my
writing that
God.
character?
So I'm a very sarcastic person by nature,
Yeah,
so like a lot of that comes from me. But like if you're going for a thriller where you're murdering your spouse, it kind of has to be over the top because it's
yeah,
not like your go-to on an everyday
right.
basis. Um, so I'm like, in her head, she has to like logic her way to this. Like, I've exhausted. It
Yes,
can't be divorce and it can't be just I leave him. It has to be murder. Like,
yes.
so I did like camp it up a little bit and went over the top. And
Mhm.
I loved that. But I knew that I also had those like really dark moments, with the
Mhm.
gore and stuff. So
Yes,
I'm like, I also need kind of like that Shakespearean counterpart of like the jester. Like, I need the funny, the comedy in it too.
yes.
So everybody is just going to be either like completely over the top in their
Yeah.
like Barnaby, like even his
Mhm.
name Barnaby. Um
Right.
like, it
Yes.
was all just as a relief from it, and the
Yeah.
sarcasm and various shades came from me and Nip Tuck, that show
Mm.
from like the early aughts. I really
Yes.
liked the two main characters there, and I'm like, I want that, but with women. And I want them
Yes.
to be like mean and horrible to each other and be
Mhm.
vain and greedy, but I also want them to be kind of endearing in a sense because they're so unlikable.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's like nice when we can, I was talking to someone about that. Like you get to like tap into like the side of you that probably thinks those things sometimes but
Yeah.
just doesn't say them, and you're like, oh, this is like the fun of watching someone who like says those thoughts, or like a pair of
Yeah.
people who says those thoughts.
Yep. It's like Desperate
So
Housewives. Like I always
yeah.
loved the over the top of that, even though I didn't watch it when it was on.
Hmm.
And it's just like, have fun with it, get lost in it,
Yes.
enjoy the like backhanded logic of murdering your husband makes sense.
Right. This is the only way I can get out of this.
The only way to get out of this.
Yeah, totally. So you referenced a couple of TV shows there, and one of my
Yeah.
favorite things that I just adored about this book is there are so many TV or movie, I think even other book references.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
I was just trying to highlight every single one when I saw them. Did you like happen to keep track of how many you fit in there, or did you just kind of like you just
Not in
wrote
the
all of
final
them?
draft.
Yeah.
So that is funny because my friends, like, I'm a human jukebox. So if you say
Uh-huh.
something that reminds me of a song, I will spit out the song. But I
Yeah.
also speak in movie lines and TV
Yes.
shows. So, like, a lot of it is just me. And
Yeah.
this, like, as I'm writing, and it, like, a word will remind me of a TV show, and I'll just throw it in
Yeah.
there for the character. Some of the Easter eggs that are in there were done deliberately. There are a
Yeah.
couple of little shout outs to like things that I love or that my friends
Yes.
love.
Yes.
But I love reading books where like I get the pop culture references
Yeah.
and it just gives like a little extra nuance to that.
Yes. Yeah, I
Oh, I
love
loved
that
it.
too because I when I was reading, you even had like a reference to like, well, this wasn't on my bingo card for the year, which is like a very TikTok reference. And it was making me think
Yes.
there was some TikTok reference you made in Chloe Cates that I even talked to you about. And I was like, she just sneaks in all of these things. I love pop culture references in a book.
Me too.
Yeah,
I
it makes it even more
right
fun.
now. Even on repeat in my head right now is the Jack Harlow song with the guy in the Rubik's
Vanilla.
Cube on TikTok.
Yes.
Vanilla, baby. It's
Yes.
on repeat in my head right
It's
now.
just stuck in your head. I know. I was on TikTok for like 10 minutes while my dogs were outside this morning, and I saw multiple of those videos already
Oh
today.
my God.
That's amazing.
Never wanted to solve a
Um,
Rubik's Cube so bad.
I know. I'm like, can I figure that out?
Yeah.
um, the book also like really, in my opinion, kind of takes a look at the way we should like fall in line with people or like act a certain way, especially in like really wealthy communities. And one of my other favorite lines is between the sisters. And Victoria says, I like my face the way it is. And her sister says, resting and full of bitch. And she says, better than frozen and mass produced. And I felt like that just like encompassed a lot of it. Like, one, like, why does it matter if you have resting bitch face? But like, two, like all of this work that a lot of people put into just like looking the same as everyone around them.
Yeah.
So were you trying to kind of like talk about that stuff too as well?
I was, especially coming from like the nip tuck dynamic because,
Mm,
Tegan, her sister in the book, is a plastic surgeon.
yeah.
And there's Victoria's side where she digs at her for not being a real doctor. So you've got
Hmm.
like that's a dynamic of like a woman in this doctor role, but she's still not good enough
Yeah.
commentary. But then you get Tegan, who is really just she can't even help it how she analyzes people's features because she is very superficial about her appearance and her
Right.
looks and the appearance of everybody else. So she talks about like Betty's breast implants and
Yes.
there's tons of jokes about lipo and nose jobs.
Hmm.
But I definitely wanted to include that, especially with like, coming off of Chloe Cates. Tegan in the book has kind of like a Dr. Pimple Popper channel, so it's still very
Hmm.
much part of her life. And it's not just her, it's like it's everywhere. I don't know what happened to my algorithm, but I will scroll through and I will get plastic surgeons talking about celebrities who may or may
Yeah.
not have had work done. And even
Hmm.
this morning, there was somebody that was talking about Taylor Swift's teeth and the
Yeah.
the
Her new
procedures that she must
veneers.
have done in her veneers.
Hmm.
And I'm like, this is where we are, where it's so
Right.
normal to discuss the very personal work that people might have
Yes.
done.
Yeah.
And I find that very creepy, that
Right.
it's just commonplace.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like it's
Uh,
one thing if
yeah,
they want to talk about that they got it done, but
right.
like just talking about whether someone else did, yeah, it's definitely weird.
It's just another layer of pressure to feel like you have to look a certain way because these people are
Right.
talking about it. So it's like, does that mean that I'm supposed to do something like that? Like everybody is
Hmm.
applauding her for having these straight teeth or these
I
high
know.
cheekbones, or like,
Yes.
is that something like, am I not good enough because of that? And I really
Hmm.
wanted to include that for Tegan as part of her
Yeah.
character. It's just
Yeah.
another way that she needs to, like, she might not feel the need to have children and a husband, but she does feel the
Hmm.
need to be perfect. And that
Mm,
10,
right.
and what does that mean for her?
Yeah. It's interesting that you brought that up about Taylor Swift too, because I've been like most of the country following all kinds of stuff for like the last year that she's released and all of that, and I love it. But even I started to notice like the more she was in my feed on these like, let's be honest, staged pop walks, like the
Yep,
longer I was just looking at it, then I was even noticing how I was like, man, my hair just like doesn't look like that. Like my hair, I just can't, I just always, oh, I wish what do I need to do to make it look that way? Or like, what do I need to do to have my skin look like that all the time? And it's like her skin
exactly.
doesn't look like that all the time. And I was like, okay, maybe I don't need to be consuming this much of like everyone's like most perfect versions of themselves.
Right. It's like, it's not just them, leaving to go to their car. There's
Right.
the money that goes into, and the team of people that goes into making you look
Yes.
a certain way.
Yeah.
And, even if a celebrity or a makeup artist will, like, this is the
Hmm.
exact product that I use, and this is the exact
Hmm.
way, like, you don't have the same access to all of
Right.
this skincare regimen. Like, it's just never going to be the same.
No, it's
But they want
not.
you to think it is, and they want you
Yes.
to think that you need to look like that.
Hmm. Well, and it's just easy to start thinking that it is what like everyone else is walking around looking like, and it's just like no,
Yep.
none of us are, not many of us
Yeah.
are, basically.
Yep.
So I forgot I had a follow-up question to all of your TV and movie and book references. So I have, for a long time I've always been like, oh, I'm just like a fan of stories, like no matter what medium it is, like I do just really enjoy stories. And so with the amount of references that you have, has that like always been a thing for you, that just like story itself is really captivating?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love this question. I like, if I think about the things that I fell in love with as a kid, one of
Hmm.
my first favorite shows was Are You Afraid of the Dark? And that's
Mm,
a different story every single week. And the people
yeah.
that are telling the stories, I love that show. And that was like really when I started thinking about writing my own stuff.
Nice.
Um, and even in like uh, poetry, I gravitate towards
Mhm.
poems that like will tell a story in a single moment, and you get
Yeah.
so much about somebody just from like this one like anecdotal story in
Yes.
poetry form.
Yeah.
Um, so I love when there is so much in in so little. So like, if
Yes.
I throw in a movie reference, like, it's not just to be because I can't help myself, like,
Yeah.
um but like, it's then you think about the movie or the TV
Mhm.
show or the other book, and then it gets layered, and then it's not just a line, it's
Right.
a window into the character or into me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you can definitely go both ways. That is, you share some poetry often, and that is
I do.
what the stuff that you pull is exactly what you said, where sometimes I'm like, wow, they really just said that in like 2 lines. And sometimes there was one time actually I was scrolling and I saw a poetry and I was like, oh, I feel like Mandy would really like that. And then it was one of those things where I just wasn't looking and you had posted it and I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess that makes sense then. But it is
I
cool.
love
I'm
that.
not like super into poetry, but like the stuff you've been sharing, I'm like, I need to read some more poetry.
It's been great for me. I really started to get back into it because I loved it. Like, for a long time, I wrote it in college, and then
Mm,
I started segueing into short stories, so I kind of stepped away from it. But like when I'm really trying to pull for characters, it's a great place to
Mhm.
start because there's so
Yeah.
many emotions and voices. And sometimes I'll read something in somebody else's voice and I'm like, that is my character right there. And I will take it
Mm,
and just run with it.
that's
And I
cool.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, to wrap things up, I've been asking everyone what they've read recently that they've loved. Any genre, anything.
Ooh, what have I I've every time I think about this, I go blank. I am currently reading The Heiress by Rachel
Oh,
Hawkins.
nice.
That's really good so far.
Nice.
Um, I
If you've watched anything too.
well, I'm still watching Fall of the House of Usher.
Oh my gosh, talk
I
about
feel like
gore.
I've been like code six crazy chaotic lately, so my
Uh-huh.
reading has been more
Oh
like
yeah.
jilted than it normally has.
Yeah.
And I haven't been watching like any TV outside of reruns of Top Chef, so like my queue is
Nice.
still super long. But like by the time I actually sit down, because I don't watch TV during the day, but by the time I get to sit down with something, I've got like half an hour before I go to sleep.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That makes sense.
I reread Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential
Ooh.
because I love him and it's such a
Yeah.
well written book. Um,
That's
and
good to know.
I loved Christina McDonald's These Still Black Waters
Ooh, I
that
have
came
not
out.
read that one yet, but
I
I've
think it
heard
was like
really good
right
things.
before, like the week before my book. It's so good.
Ooh, I need to bump that up.
Yeah,
I keep hearing people
yeah,
love that one as well.
it is really good.
Awesome. Nice. Well, thank you for being a guest again,
Yeah,
and
thank
I
you for
can't
having me
wait
on.
for the
It's
next
always
one.
good to talk to you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Between the Lines, and if you did, the biggest thing you can do to support the podcast is to go rate and review it on whatever platform you listen on. You can also follow me on Instagram at the girl with the book on the couch. And if you still need more thrillers in your life, check out Killing the Tea, my other podcast where I talk to my friend Gare about literally everything we read.